Welcome back. And Julie, I have great news for you.
Yes, what's that?
We get to talk about our favorite subject on today's show.
Yes, but with a twist.
Yes, we don't have to keep on talking about buyers endlessly. Today, we're going to be talking about listings, talking to listing agents, those of you who are looking to become listing agents, and how you're going to be presenting to your sellers all of this, let's be honest, somewhat confusing information as pertains to the new buyer agent commission laws. So when a seller says, I don't want to pay a buyer agent's commission, we're going to tell you what to say and how to say it and show the seller why in many cases it actually benefits them to offer compensation to the buyer's agent as a concession of the real estate transaction.
That's right, and how to get in and out of that conversation professionally and succinctly. But before we get to that scripting, Tim, if they want to follow along with the notes, how do they do that?
That's right. So go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. harrisrealestatedaily.com is our daily newsletter where all of our notes live. We wish we could continue to put all of our notes inside the description of the show and all the rest of it. But iTunes and all the others on YouTube have limited the amount of space we can, occupy for our notes. And as you guys know, Julie and I have very long-form notes. We actually script out every single podcast, of which we've done over 5,000 since 2018. That's how many podcasts we've done. This podcast has had, it's crazy to say, but over 20 million downloads. And I say more than because it's more than that. But, that was 3 years ago. So who knows what it has now. Moral of the story is if you want our notes, you just have to subscribe, and it doesn't cost you anything, to Harris Real Estate Daily, harrisrealestatedaily.com. Again, just go there and put in your email address, and you're off to the races, and the notes will be sent to you along with the podcast every single day.
All right, so how to handle the seller's objection to paying a buyer's agent fee. Before we get into that scripting, you must know the following information and statistics to properly handle that objection. So here are some things you're going to gather up before you're ready to do your scripting. How many agents are in your MLS? However many hundreds or thousands. What percentage of homes in your market historically change hands using two brokers? It's most of them, and your board keeps track of those stats. In other words, how often is there a cooperative situation between the listing and buyer agents? Any new forms, of course, that your board or state requires for commission agreements.
Now, remember, this is something, by the way, you could also use the same information when talking with buyers, but really we're gearing today's show talking with sellers because the sellers are going to have a lot of misperception and frankly, bad information floating around their heads as far as buyer agent commissions. And it's our contention, and I think all of you will agree, that the seller will not care what the concessions are, including a buyer's agent's commission, as long as they're accomplishing from the sale what they want to accomplish. As long as they're walking away from the sale of the property with enough money to accomplish their next goal, they could care less what the commissions are. Because after all, what difference does it make what the commissions are as long as they're netting what they need to net from the transaction?
Exactly, which, by the way, has always been that objection handler. Now we're just using it in a new situation. So it would also be good to know what percentage of your listings you typically sell yourself. If you do dual agency, if you don't have those stats yet, you can use your brokers or your team numbers if you don't have your own averages. And Tim just said this, as always prepare seller's net sheet showing a low, medium, and high purchase price, including the buyer side commission, as well as, of course, your listing commission.
I want to be super clear here. Julie and I, even though we're in the category of sales trainers, aren't really sales trainers because what we're doing is we're showing you how to consult, how to help the seller in this case understand the ramifications of all the decisions that are necessary, all the fees that they might ask to pay as far as a concession. And we're asking you to know the statistics and know the facts. We're not going to give you some manipulative arm-twisting script. Some of you hear scripts, and a lot of you are basically going to have your skin crawl from that. And I get it. But what we're doing is we're giving you a script is nothing other than a conversation outline that results in a desired result on behalf of the buyer, the seller, and with you, right? That's all it is. It's just a conversation outline. You're using scripts every single day with every person you talk to. You just don't realize it. I mean, you're using a script when you talk to your spouse, when you talk to your kid. When you do talk to buyers and sellers, you're kind of saying the same thing. That's a script. What we're doing is we're giving you a script that's proven to work in every market, in every price range, scripts rather. It's very concise and focused on what's in the best interest of the buyers and the sellers. And you're going to back it up, as Julie started today's podcast, knowing the actual market statistics.
That's right. Scripts maybe should be renamed conversational directional outline to make it a little less intimidating
Well,
sounding.
I know what people are sometimes thinking when they hear this type of thing. They're saying, "Oh, Julie and Tim are just trying to, teach agents to say these highly manipulative NLP sort of like, snake oil type crap to get buyers and sellers to do what's in the best interest of the agent, not what's in the best interest of the buyer seller." I got news for you. You will not be in business unless you're actually of the mindset of what's in it for me. You always have to be focusing on what's in it for them, because the more value or the more of what is in it for them you are able to prove you can deliver, the more clients you're going to have and the more money you make. So to think you can put the cart before the horse, you're absolutely wrong. And people that do get into the industry, that do have that snake oil type approach, they don't last.
No, that's right, especially now. Okay, so the seller's objection to paying a buyer side commission comes in several flavors. That all basically means I don't want to pay for the buyer's agent, but you may hear it like this: I don't want to pay the buyer side commission. I heard we no longer have to pay the buyer agent's commission. I heard it's legal now not to pay for the other agent's fee, or I only want to pay X% total. How does that work? It's all basically the same objection, objecting to paying all or some of the buyer side fee. Now,
it's ironic, Julie, that all those things were already true. I don't have to pay a buyer agent commission. You've never had to. I've heard we no longer have to pay a buyer agent commission. You never had to. I heard it's now legal to not pay the buyer agent a fee or blah, blah, blah. That's what's interesting is that a lot of these objections or a lot of these, I think this misinformation is coming from the press.
Yes.
We've read so many articles, and so have you, and we're professionals, and so are you. Then we can see through the misperceptions that reporter had out of ignorance or out of basically design. It doesn't matter. But can you imagine what it's like to read for a seller to be reading those same articles with not being a professional in the real estate industry, how confused they are? So you're going to have to approach all these conversations with compassion, knowing that they're probably confused, knowing that they're overwhelmed with misinformation. Do not feel challenged. Do not feel threatened. Do not feel on the opposite side of the table.
Triggered.
Do not. Exactly. You're going to have to understand at the end of the day, they want to hire someone that they know, love, and trust, or they want to hire a caring, competent real estate professional that's going to deliver to them the result that they want. It's either buying, in this case, selling a home. They want to hire you. It's your game to lose. That's the reason for you to become more professional.
Yeah, that's right. And that you point out a good point, which is you've never had to do any of those things. And you can say that in passing and then move on. So remember the objection, I don't want to pay for the buyer side or any of that flavor. Here's your answer. Well, that's true. And you've never had to. You're not required to offer the buyer's agent a commission, but you certainly could. And then you pause. The reason that you pause after saying, but you could, is because you want the seller to ask you, oh, well, why is that?
Now
you're being conversational.
I know we're gonna give you an added little bonus script. And Julie and I went over this yesterday on yesterday's show too. When somebody says something to you, this is the reason she said the word pause 3 times, is you don't want to just jump on what they say. Right. Like a grenade, because it's going to blow up and you're not going to make it, right? So what you want to do is you want to pause and you want to allow them to realize that you're internalizing and thinking about what they're saying, and then you need to repeat what they said, and then you need to ask this question. So, look, Julie, I don't want to have to pay a buyer's agent's commission. Then I want you to do this. I want you to pause, and I want you to say, that's interesting. So what you're saying is you don't want to pay a buyer's agent commission, but Mr. Seller, let me ask you, if it actually benefited you in a multitude of ways to at least consider paying a buyer's agent's commission as part of a concession of the real estate contract, would that still be a decision you want to make, is not to pay it? In other words, by considering it as a concession, you actually could net more from the sale of the home or net the same.
Or faster.
Is that still an issue you might have? And you're going to get the seller. They're then going to say, well, if you can prove it to me, they're going to say some version of that. And when they do say that, then you're going to need to go back and validate with the statistics from the MLS that Julie gave you at the top of today's podcast.
Yes. So the point that we're both making here is that you want the seller to ask, oh, how does that work? Why is that? Why would I want to consider that? To Tim's point, you're going to show them some statistics and facts, but you want this to be conversation. Remember, if you're not getting any back and forth, that's a reason for concern. You want them to ask you this so that you can then say, I'm glad you asked. You might want to consider offering to compensate an agent who brings a buyer for your home. First reason, X number of agents belong to our MLS. Remember, you were going to research how many thousands of agents. We've got 3,000 agents, let's say, belong to our MLS. We want them all to be excited to show your home to their qualified and motivated buyers. If your house is right for their buyers, we want them to write an acceptable offer. Wouldn't you agree? Of course, the seller's going to say yes. We need to be able to compensate those agents for their hard work, not just for bringing them to the showing, but making sure that their financing is lined, the financing of the buyer, that they handle the inspections properly, and all the other things they do for their part of the transaction. For this reason, you may want to offer to pay the buyer's agent. Here's a second reason. This is you talking. Buyers in today's market are having to come up with a whole lot more money to purchase a home than they did just a couple of years ago. Between the higher purchase prices, larger down payment funds, bigger monthly payments, there's just not that much left to pay out of pocket for another expense. They're cobbling together lots of funds to make the purchase. If they have to also pay out of pocket for their agent, it could work against us. They could be taken out of the market completely, or at least out of the market for listings that don't include the buyer's agent's compensation.
And or if you're in Canada, and we think this is going to happen in the United States as well, there's no incentive for the seller not to pay the buyer agent commission, because in many markets, again, we're talking about Canada here, but it's going to come to the United States, mark my word, there's going to be an automatic increase in the commission that goes to the listing agent if they're ending up having to work with both the buyer and the seller. No, I'm not talking about dual agency.
Right.
I'm talking about the listing agent representing the seller, but an unrepresented buyer shows up, and they're going to basically, always, this listing agent's just going to write the contract technically, but then because the listing agent there's no agency, in other words, because the listing agent's going to have to do the work as the seller's agent, as the listing agent, and now representing the buyer, that's twice the work. And in markets like John Walkinshaw and other markets, John Walkinshaw, the number one agent in Canada, is one part of our, nearly 4,000 agent group in EXP. Well, guess what? The commissions automatically increase, not just with John, but with all the agents in his MLS. That's the type of thing that's going to start happening. That's going to it's going to remove the incentive of the seller to think that they can basically not pay a buyer agent commission and save that money for themselves. And also, it's going to take out of the market the agents out there who don't know how to compete in this market for working with sellers and listings and your competitors in your marketplace. And you're gonna see the MLSs are going to start putting that into the transaction. It only makes sense. The added liability from representing the seller and now the buyer does merit a higher compensation.
That's right. And remember, at the top, we talked about showing them their net sheet. So they're seeing that there's still plenty of money for them to accomplish their goals. That's tied into this conversation too. Now, part of this objection handling, you also can say it's not really up to the agent ultimately to decide which homes they show or don't show to their qualified and motivated buyers. The buyers themselves may ask to see homes only that include their agent's fee. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that we don't want to limit our buyer pool if we don't have to. So you might want to offer compensation to the other agent. And as you can see from your net sheet, we have that already figured into what you're going to walk away with.
So, Mr. Seller, the other thing we can take into consideration is the fact that in many cases, let's say, for example, we've already agreed that, Mr. Seller's house is worth $1 million. You owe $500,000 on it. You want to walk away with $500,000 or, $480,000. And given these different scenarios, even if we do have to pay a concession towards the seller or towards the buyer, maybe we're going to pay for the home warranty. Maybe we're going to pay to have the pool resurfaced. Maybe we're going to pay for new pool equipment, whatever, as a concession towards the prospective buyer. Buyer's agent commission, all these things are going to go on top of the purchase price. And I'm going to say this. We've been talking about this every day. I'm surprised the industry hasn't picked up on this yet. They will. When you're doing a Fannie Freddie mortgage, you can put up to 6%, including buyer agent concessions, on top of the purchase price. So you might find a seller that just dug in and they're not willing to pay a commission or whatever. You can then tell the buyer's agent what I just told you. Why don't you have the buyer agent essentially factor in or finance in your buyer's agent commission and any other concessions that you're asking, because the seller, and because it's a competitive house, has to net this. And the other two offers that I've received are not including a concession for the buyer's agent or whatever. You pay, it's now $1 million. And your buyer agent commission, whatever it is, let's say it's $30,000. Put that on top and offer $1,030,000. And and believe it or not, I think Fannie Freddie in some markets it's a $900,000, isn't it? Loan limit.
Yeah, I think in some it's up to $1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So it's financeable. And it doesn't have to appraise for $1,030,000. 6% of the concessions goes on top of whatever it appraises for. How about that?
That's right. And with interest rates coming down, that added a little bit on top of their monthly payment is actually shrinking, not growing, because the rates are coming down, driving payments down.
Exactly.
So-
And, there's all kinds of different ways. So we're going to teach you in the new program that we have called Ethical Real Estate Professional, all the different scenarios that you can. This is for buyer's agents, but listing agents, you should be doing this too, because I have unfortunate news for you. In many cases, you're going to have to be the one that's coaching and training the buyer's agents how to actually get a deal together, because they're not going to know, or they're not going to know how to actually ask for concessions. And they're going to be doing all these, let's just be honest, not very professional things. You're going to have to be an expert on this. You want to become an ethical real estate professional designee, so that frankly, you can expose them to the different ways that they can be competitive in this market, so you can get your listing sold.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about 2 different ways so far about how to handle that objection if a listing client says, I don't want to pay the buyer side fee.
By the way, to learn more about ethical real estate professional, text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. Text the word buyer to 47372. We've been talking about it in the last few days. Today, we want to focus on sellers. So, Julie, back to your notes.
Okay, so here's the third way. Again, conversational. You can ask that seller, let me ask you this. When you bought this home, was your buyer's agent fee covered through the terms of the sale, or did you pay them separately? Of course, we know the seller's always going to say, well, I guess it was included. Sometimes they haven't even really thought about it, right?
But I think theoretically, Julie, it's not only been included, but the buyers have been financing the buyer agent commission since day one.
Exactly. But nobody was really talking about that. So that's why this is part of the script. Let me ask you this. When you bought this home, was your buyer agent fee covered through the terms of the sale, or did you pay them separately? Seller's going to think for a second, well, I guess it was included. So you did pay it, but it was part of the purchase price, right? And the seller will say, yes, I guess it must have been part of the deal. And you can ask, if it hadn't been, what would you have done? The seller will probably say, I guess we would have had to come up with more money or buy something else, or maybe we wouldn't have bought anything at all. So here's what you say. So if we applied today's rules to the purchase today, would you have paid out of pocket? The seller's almost always going to say, no, probably not. And remember too, now we're going to tie it into higher purchase prices. You're going to say, yeah, me neither. And back then, prices weren't even so high as they are today. Did you know that in just the past 3 years, nationwide home prices have gone up by an average of 48%? A 20% down payment on your home is blank. Let's say it's 50 grand, for example. So we should at least consider not making the buyer have to come up with even more money than they need to close on your home, right? The seller's going to sit back and think about it and probably say, okay, I get it. And then you can say, finally, even if you don't decide to cover the buyer's agent commission, certain buyers may still wish to see your home and even want to buy it. That would be great. But if those buyers can't afford their agent, they can legally and ethically ask for their agent to be paid in a seller's concession. That's what Tim just talked about a second ago. This is fine and has always been legal, but it can complicate the purchase agreement and sometimes hinder the buyer's ability to obtain financing. Now, we have coaching that overcomes that, because FHA, VA, USAA, Fannie and Freddie now are allowing for the commission to go over that. But again, it complicates the negotiation sometimes.
let's just cut through it, Julie. You're saying it nicely, but a lot of buyers agents aren't going to have the sophistication, or frankly, inexperienced listing agents aren't going to have the sophistication to know how this deal works, how to work these deals like this. But 12 months from now, everyone will have experienced these types of scenarios.
Correct.
And they'll figure it out. But over the next, let's be honest, again, 60, 90, 120 days, it's going to be a little bit thorny out there.
That's right.
I also want to address something else. Somebody listening right now is feeling like criticizing us because they're saying, you're going to somehow trick or coerce the buyer agent to finance their commission. If they finance it over 30 years, and it's, say, a $30,000 commission, amortized, right? Amortized over how much money they interested, right? I get it. So what you're going to discover is, in most cases, and you can show this to your prospective buyer, or even to the seller for that matter, that most people stay in their homes how long? 5 years, 7 years? Ask your prospective clients. And here's what you can actually do. Now, this is kind of next level, but follow me. You can actually offer to pay, let's say, for example, Julie and I did this homework. It's so funny. When we did it, we were using an interest rate that was 6%.
Yeah.
And now fixed rates are at 6%.
It's even better now.
Listen to the podcast we did this Monday. Anyway, so if you were to purchase a $450,000 house and you were to put 20% down, I'm going to go through this quick because the little details, you can check my math later, but this is what it is. $450,000, you put 20% down, but then you're going to have to finance the buyer's agent commission. Let's say it was a 3% buyer agent commission, whatever you agree to with your buyer. We're not setting commissions or anything like that. That's whatever your rate is that you decide to do. It could be 1%, it could be 10%, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you're going to then the actual amount of money that the buyer is going to end up having to finance is going to be the equivalent of 20% down, but you're obviously going to have them finance then your 3%. That added 3% on a $450,000 mortgage at 6% amortized over 30 years. What did I forget? I forgot one thing. Is $54 a month. Okay. So what if you were to say to Mr. Buyer, and you might want to do this out of the gates, frankly, I would, is tell them, look, this is going to cost you an added $54 a month to pay my buyer's agent commission. But here's what I'm going to do. At closing, disclose to everyone. It's going to be completely in writing. Everyone's going to know about it. I'm going to actually credit you back the equivalent of what you're going to be paying, that $54 a month over, you said, let's say they're going to be there for 5 years on average. So I'm going to credit you back at closing 54 times 12 times 5, right? So what is that? 77. It's like $800 times 5. It's $4,000.
Yeah.
So you could do that. You could do half of it.
You could do it for 2 years.
You could do 2 years. You could do 12 months. You could do 6 months. You could do whatever it is. All I'm showing you is there's different ways to go about accomplishing the same goal. But in our opinion, and we've obviously spent an enormous amount of time on this, we do believe that in many cases, the sellers are going to continue to pay the buyer's agent's commission as a concession to the transaction. Why? Because statistically, you're going to be able to, let's say the seller says, I don't want to pay the buyer agent commission. Okay, you don't have to. That's your decision. But what if it benefited you to? What if I could show you that it does benefit you to? This is Julie's first script. And they're going to say, well, if you could show me it benefits me, and then you're going to show them the last 10 homes like theirs that sold. Here are the last 10 homes in Oakhurst subdivision that sold. Remember Oakhurst subdivision?
Yes.
Thousands and thousands of homes built by
Oak Creek.
Homes. Oak Creek, yes. Oak Creek.
Phase 47.
So here are the last 10 homes that sold. And these are all similar to your house. 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,800 square feet, and show them the comps, and they're going to agree. Okay, so here's the list price. Here's what they sold for, and here are the concessions. In many MLSs, you might have to call the listing agents if your MLS isn't that sophisticated, but in many MLSs, they're already going to start publishing what the concessions were. So the house was listed for $500. It sold for $499. But that included $500 for fixing the hot water tank, and $10,000 for new concessions, right? Normal concessions. So you're going to be able to pull out what the sale price was in the concessions, and then you're going to show the seller that all these last 10 homes, you can see that this one sold for list price, this one sold for over list price, and look at these 3 homes here. And so what's the difference? Why didn't those 3 homes sell? They're not offering any concessions. So you can see not only did they sell for over or close to asking price, but they also sold in a heck of a lot less time. Mr. Seller, why do you think that's true? And here's why. It's not because the buyer's agents were steering them to the houses that were paying concessions. It's because the buyers themselves had the obligation to pay the buyer's agent's commission, and they were the ones choosing to see those homes because they're being offered a buyer's agent because the buyer's agent commission was already something the seller was willing to pay as a concession. You guys don't think there's a precedent for that? There's a billion precedents for that. VA, FHA, all these others. Julie, you want to talk about?
That's right. Well, here's something that very clearly demonstrates that. Most of the bigger builders have in-house financing, right? Where they buy down the rate, they have their own mortgage lender. Okay, that's a concession, right? They're paying to have a lower interest rate for that buyer's loan. Well, you might find it interesting that the average resale price in the country today is $426,500. Guess what the average new construction is? $460,000, okay? Because they include a whole bunch of concessions. It's very common.
But like, for example, on an FHA deal, those of you guys who have not done FHAs and VAs, get ready. They're going to be coming your way. All those first-time buyers are getting back in the market. What happens on one of those government deals is that there are a lot of fees that the buyer is not allowed to pay. It can be paid by the seller as a concession, but it can't be out of pocket, right? All kinds of things. Like if you accept an FHA contract, and I'm giving you an example, and an appraiser comes out, that appraiser, it's actually an FHA inspector. They actually are more or less acting as an appraiser. And that case file that's associated with that transaction stays married to that house for like 6 months. Why am I telling you this? Because what's going to happen is those added fees that the FHA financing necessitates the seller to pay is, again, that's an added fee that seller is going to have to pay, but they can put it on top of the purchase price. Yes. When Julie and I were selling houses back in the early 90s to first-time buyers, All of them needed points. The interest rates back when we were selling real estate started with a 7.
I remember an extra $125 closing fee.
Right.
That we had to put on the top.
Right. All these added fees because they were coming with FHA financing and they had only 3% or no percent down, those fees had to be paid by the seller. Well, what some listing agents would do to their own detriment, this is the point I'm making, is they would put in the MLS no FHA buyers because they didn't want their seller, or frankly, maybe the house was too ratty and it needed too many repairs. But most likely they just didn't want to deal with the complexity of an FHA contract. And guess what we were able to prove to our listings when we went on listing appointments? The ones where the realtor specifically said we're not willing to take FHA, VA, whatever, oftentimes expired, had really crappy list to sell price ratios, way longer than average days on the market. So there's tons of historical precedents for how actually incentives at the end of the day actually will dictate long-term behavior. And we're going to see the incentive for the seller to continue to pay a concession towards the buyer's agent commission is still going to be relevant because it benefits them. So if it benefits them, they're still going to continue to want to consider paying it.
Yeah, and really the only difference is this has been going on forever through the purchase price, right? The only difference is we're just talking about it now. We're talking about how that.
Well, that's the big difference.
That's it. That's it.
Well,
This has been way overcomplicated.
It truly has. Well, I mean, that is the whole thing. Like you meet, hey, Bob, this is, Bill and Betty. We want to go look at 123 Elm Street. Well, great. I'll meet you over there. I mean, there's no formalized approach, generally speaking, working with buyers. You said it in our book, Julie. Working with buyers is physical labor. Working with sellers is mental labor. But now working with buyers is both physical and mental labor because you're going to have to learn how to actually present to them because they have to sign an exclusive buyer agency contract. But I want you to focus on sellers, right? So when it comes to listings, you're going to have to help them understand that as provided the numbers prove out, you're going to have to use historical data that's pre this new regime being put in place. So you're going to have to use historical data back from when their buyer agent commission was an entitlement to the transaction for now. But 60 to 90, 120 days from now, looking into the future, you're going to be able to actually show the seller what the actual statistics are for the houses that offered a buyer agent concession versus those that didn't. And you're going to see that all the things that are the seller's going to want are going to come to them quicker, higher sale price, list to sell price ratio is going to be better. All those things when they're willing to actually, because they're going to be given the incentive to offer concessions because it benefits them. Doesn't it make sense?
It's all about the benefit to the seller. For any of you who are getting all into naysayer and this is all kinds of, coercion or whatever. And I want you to also pay attention. One of the reasons why the script is the way it is, well, it's true, you don't have to, but you could, is that also keeps you away from anything construed as a steering conversation. You don't, as a listing agent, you don't want to say, Tim, I mean, that's all true, but if you don't, you won't get any showings. You don't want to take that approach.
Well,
you want to say, well, it's true, you don't have to, but you could, and here's why, A, B, C, and D, which all benefit you, right? How you
Mr.
bring it
Seller.
back to Mr. Seller.
Right. But you're going to have to know how to show them the statistics, show them the numbers, show them the list to sell price ratio, show them the days on the market.
And how often we have co-ops, which is virtually all the time.
Right. And then ask them, Mr. Seller, I mean, you can see when you offer concessions, the days on the market is this versus that. Okay. You can see the list to sell price ratio is this versus that. You can see what the net is based on the recent sales is this as a percent versus that. You're not steering them. You're showing them, facts, and they're going to make the logical decision that they want to do what's best for them, which is most likely going to be given offering an incentive in the form of a concession.
That's right. And I have to look up these facts again and add to our packet that we have for them. Keep in mind too, and there's all kinds of stats on this. I think NAR does the best job about this. For sale by owners, do you think they sit around longer or shorter? A lot of them aren't paying buyer sides, are they? Typically, they have a lot longer days on the market.
Well, most FSBOs end up listing.
Exactly. Why is that? Because as it turns out, going it on your own and either not paying a listing agent or buyer's agent or both tends to stretch out the days on the market and not sell your home.
That's right. And so listen, a lot of you who are listening are ready to become listing agents. Maybe you don't want anything, and I don't blame you, to do with all this buyer agent Mickey Mouse. So you want to become a listing agent? Hit the easy button. Join Premier Coaching. That is your entry into being part of our coaching organization. In our all-in, we have close to 4,000 agents that are participating with us. And there's a reason, because we teach you guys how to be listing agents. We obviously want to work with you guys to learn how to work with buyers, but I'll give you a little, you're going to skip to the end of the book. You're going to read how the book is summarized. In the summary, here it is. Being a listing agent gives you the ultimate control. When you're the listing agent, you have leverage. When you are a buyer's agent, you are the buyer's leverage. There is a huge difference. So we encourage all of you to seriously consider moving forward with our Premier Coaching Program. And we give you Premier Coaching for the first 30 days for free. And yes, that does include a daily semi-private coaching call. Text the word Premier to 47372. Text the word Premier, Premier, to 47372. Go ahead and do it now. Text the word Premier to 47372, and we'll text you back a link to join Premier Coaching for free for the next 30 days. Go ahead and do that, and it's going to be, for a lot of you, the most logical path forward. It's certainly something that all of you should be considering. Really, you're going to have buyers that are going to show up in your lives. If you're a listing agent, we have plenty of coaching clients that are the most successful listing agents that don't even want anything to do with buyers.
Yep.
We show you that you can, and oftentimes opposed to adding a buyer agent, team and all the rest of it, refer those buyer leads out. You can refer your Zillow's now in some markets charging 50% referral fee. Well, if you're a listing agent and you don't want to work with buyers, or maybe you only want to work with 2 or 3 hand-selected buyers, refer all your other buyers out. The buyers that don't have homes to sell, that you're not listing, refer those guys out to a independent buyer's agent and charge them. I just told you, Zillow charges 50%. So if you're charging 35%, you're probably going to have buyer's agents standing around the block wanting to work with you and take those referrals. But that only comes from you having lots of inventory. There has not been a better time to become a listing agent, probably in the last 5 years, at least.
I agree.
Yes.
100%.
So text the word Premier to 47372. That is your homework from today's podcast. Have a fantastic day. We will talk with you on the show tomorrow.